Yes. So one of the big problems, and in 2008, for example, it was a perfect storm where the budgets were being cut in the courthouses throughout the country. So remember, we had a recession, budgets are cut, and so there's less staff and less support staff. So one of the things that our legislative representatives need to do is do an analysis and investigation about what kind of funding do the courts need and what type of supports do they need in order to get it right, right? And so that was the big problem. But the other problem is what I call the money dynamics. When these laws were initially created, it was believed that the judges always knew the law and could operate in the best interest of the conservatees. But now what we're finding is that people are getting these very lucrative cases, and because they're favorites, perhaps we don't understand the money dynamics, but I do think there's an element of cronyism that develops because these judges are looking for familiar faces, again, not to do evil, but because they don't have anywhere else to go. So the money dynamics and the whole issue of court-appointed counsel needs to be reviewed. I have been lobbying in my own private way for a separate group of lawyers to be especially trained, supervised, and held accountable whenever they represent a person facing or in conservatorships. We do that for children in dependency court. We do that for criminals. That's what the whole entire public defender's office is all about. I think it's time that we address that we have to separate judges appointing, assigning, selecting favorites, and then doling out the money, because these dynamics are clearly not working for people from coast to coast.
It's interesting you say that, because you're like not the first person to kind of put this tie between the criminal system and the conservatorship system with me, and I feel like I could talk with you about it all day, but I just want to take it back to Britney Spears, everything that's happened today. The one thing, we all don't have access to is her medical records, which are huge in deciding a conservatorship. So I'm just kind of thinking, I'm kind of playing the devil's advocate here. If they decide that, she does have to remain under conservatorship, they do evaluation or something, what is the benefit of her still having her own attorney? I'm just kind of trying to think of all the different ways it could go and how having her own attorney, which is the biggest thing that came out at the hearing today, like why that's so important.
Well, one of the more disturbing features of this conservatorship in particular was the way that they were able to isolate Britney. They controlled her cell phone. It is alleged that they control her social media. They control, and the words in the court order actually says using any means necessary to control her social contacts. I mean, this is really extreme, and I don't understand why Mr. Ingham, the court-appointed lawyer, would have gone along with all of this. I have my suspicions that she was really not communicating with him very much over the years, because after all, he thrust himself upon her. He wasn't her chosen attorney. He made her utilize him as an attorney. And, and I find that to be even quite insulting. You would never do that to a man, for example, right? So what I see happening is, even if a conservatorship is somehow warranted, and I will never agree right now that it is, it would be worthwhile to go through these orders and make sure that they are the least restrictive, that she has the most freedom, the most access to her own money, the most access to her own friends possible. And we know that hasn't happened. So I'm looking forward to seeing big changes for Britney Spears, all for the better, very, very quickly.
Awesome. And just a couple more questions for you here. I need to verify this. I haven't seen it from, a source, but I've just seen on tweets, some folks are saying that in the hearing, she, thanked her fans for being out there and said she couldn't have, had the bravery to talk and, do all of these, speak on her behalf. You've been out there this whole time, we were just talking about it earlier today, you know, you said you've been out there yelling, you've been called crazy. How does it feel to you personally to like hear that from her and to see this change that's been happening because of this movement?
Oh, you're gonna make me cry. So, I've been advocating kind of all by myself, but not really. There are a few of us that have been trying to bring attention to the dysfunctional probate court system for quite a while. And again, I want to make it clear that I don't see nefarious behavior. I don't think any of the judges work hard in order to find ways to harm people or isolate them, but it's happening. And it's happening because people don't understand the law and they're not abiding by the law. And that can be corrected. And that's the good news. So for me to know that it was the Free Britney movement, the fans, their love, their compassion and passion, it's a beautiful love story. And I hope that one day someone in Hollywood really understands that in real life, the power of love and the power of kindness is compelling and overwhelming, and we really can effectuate positive change. So a lot of my tweets say things like, first we free Britney, then we change the world. And so I hope the young people understand that they had nothing but love, and that was everything. And so good for them. And yeah, I'm so grateful because I was trying and getting nowhere. They amplified the message, and that's a beautiful, loving thing.
A beautiful answer of goosebumps over here. And just like two more questions for you. One, I thought it was interesting that Sam Ingham and the Bessemer Trust, both resigned, kind of, distanced themselves just from that last hearing when Britney spoke. What are your thoughts about that? Do you expect to see more people like, I know her manager has also resigned, but obviously that's a little bit different because it doesn't have to be court approved. But I'm just interested in your thoughts. You've seen a lot of these different cases. Is it surprising that all of a sudden, there's a huge move to distance yourself from this case if you're involved?
Well, Bessemer Trust, I read the declaration when they said that the reason they agreed to sign on as co-conservators was because they were told that this was a voluntary conservatorship. Whether it's worthwhile to go into the he said, she said part of it, I'll leave that up to the people that are actually involved in the case, but it is very disturbing to think that there may have been a misrepresentation about what was going on. And, I'll just say it that it concerned me from the very beginning when I found out that the court-appointed lawyer was awarded a weekly stipend of $10,000. To me, that set up a huge conflict of interest, because what possible economic motivation would he have to bring the petition for termination? And it also kind of smacks of this question of to what extent that he may have been more aligned with the pro-conservator attorneys than he really should have been. So again, I'm only going off of the paperwork, but I believe Bessemer Trust did the right thing. If they were told that this was voluntary, and maybe in the moment it was, people change their minds, it was the right thing to do. And in terms of Mr. Ingham, I think he has something to answer for right now. I think this is really troubling to hear that she's been this unhappy, and especially that she did not want her father involved from the beginning. When I first saw that Hulu documentary, I was in my living room. I wanted to throw, something at the TV. I was so upset because one of the very first things that the court-appointed lawyer is supposed to do is to make sure that nobody is appointed that the conservatee objects to. So I think the new attorney has his hands full. A lot of questions to be answered here.
That's for sure. It'll be really interesting to see how it continues to progress. And I know you answered this kind of in a different questions for you, but I'm gonna leave with my last question here is kind of what do you expect to see? What can we all kind of expect to see in the next steps going forward?
Well, I know that Judge Penny will want to be fair to Britney and her new attorney. So they're going to have time to gather up the files and gather up the records. I would love to see a writ being filed, but it is something of a long shot. So Mr. Rosengart may take the more slow and steady approach and start negotiating. I absolutely expect to see a petition for the removal of Jamie Spears at the very least. That will be brought, even if Britney says, you know, I'd like to have Jody or another agent or entity in charge of my finances. I don't see why she would do that, but I think the first thing we need to do is find out this father-daughter dynamic, which I've heard has been quite disturbing and dysfunctional for most of Britney's life. So what I think we'll see is that the conservatorship will be dismantled, maybe in one fell swoop if the Court of Appeals agrees, or maybe they just start peeling away the authority and the decision-making powers that have now been granted to other people.